Last time we sort of started talking about that last bit of John 17 from I think it's from about verse 20 down to 26 at the end. But we got cut off, so we didn't really get a chance to finish off with that. I can't actually remember where we got to. Do you remember much about that?
It's about 3 weeks ago, so I'm not. I think we got down to the last paragraph, verse
24. Yep.
Yeah.
I might just read that, and then we'll start from there.
Okay. Why don't you read from 20, just to give the context?
Yeah.
Because it seems like that was it was all part of the same. He's praying not just for the 12 or the 11 disciples, but he's praying for, like he says, those who through their words put their faith in me.
So verse 20, John 17, but it is not for those alone that I pray, but for those also who through their words put their faith in me. May they all be one, as you, Father, are in me and I in you. So also may they be in us, that the world may believe that you did send me. The glory which you gave me I have given to them, that they may be one as we are one. I in them and you in me. May they be perfectly one. Then the world will learn that you did send me, that you did love them as you loved me. Father, I desire that these men, who are your gift to me, may be with me where I am, so that they may look upon my glory, which you have given me, because you did love me before the world began. O righteous Father, although the world does not know you, I know you, and these men know that you did send me. I made your name known to them and will make it known, so that the love you have for me may be in them and I may be in them. Yes. There's a lot of sort of repeating those core ideas. And last week we talked a lot about that, where he's repeating things but also building on them as he goes.
He said some stuff that I think is beyond our full understanding. We're sort of in the process of trying to get our heads around what he said. His purpose is that they may they all be one, as you, Father, are in me and I in you, so also may they be in us, that the world may believe that you sent me. And then he repeats that, the glory which you gave me I've given to them, that they may be one as we are one. I in them and you in me, may they be perfectly one. So I was talking about an experience that, shoot. Sorry about that. Now what? Lucas, we've made so many mistakes. You've got your sound turned off.
I'm still muted. Okay.
All right. What I was trying to say was that the last thought, or what out of that first bit that you read, where he said, may they all be one, as you, Father, are in me and I in you, so also may they be in us, that the world may believe that you sent me. And then he repeats that with the added bit that he's given us the same glory that the Father gave him. He goes on there and he says, the glory which you gave me, I have given to them, that they may be one as we are one. I in them and you in me, may they be perfectly one. So
is the oneness the glory?
I think the fact that God has allowed us and somehow rather introduced us into his very being, his finite creatures somehow rather brought into this same the same relationship as the Father and the Son have in the very essence of the Godhead itself.
Yeah.
The fact that he has made this possible and that he really wants it to happen, I think that is to God's glory. It shows how nobody would have thought that a creator God would have done that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
And
is that the glory, though, that he's talking about the Father gave to him?
There's a glory that he had because he was the Word. Remember,
Yeah.
the Word became flesh and we saw his glory. There's a glory that he had as God before he became a human being. And then it seems to me that there's a kind of glory that is not just the glory that he had, what would you say, naturally or in his own right, but the glory that he was prepared to actually become one of the creatures that he had made, that he was born into the human race. There's a glory, it seems to me, in the fact that he became a human being. And then that glory that I get tangled up in it every time I try to think it through. That's a glory that he's given to us, sort of in reverse. God became man so that we human beings might become gods.
Yeah.
God.
There is a glory that he talked about earlier, though, as well, where he's just about to, he's saying that the Father is about to glorify him, and the implication of that is that glory is to do with what's going to happen as he suffers and dies and then is resurrected.
Well, that's what he said right at the beginning of the prayer. I have glorified you on earth by completing the work that you gave me to do. Now, Father, glorify me in your presence with the glory that I had with you before the world began.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is the Word became flesh and we saw his glory.
Yeah.
But then,
so it's to do with the fact of who he is, his identity again as the part of God, that he's God, and that he's become a human being.
Yeah.
It's the incarnation, it's the glory of that. And then we see the glory of God through the person that he is, and then he's then inviting us into that glory to become sons and daughters of the living God.
Yeah. And the whole thing, the whole plan of salvation, that says so much about God. His love, his grace, his mercy. This came to mind where in Ephesians he said that in union with Christ, he's raised us up and seated us with him in the heavenly realms. And he's already seated with God. And it's so that he might demonstrate in the ages to come the immensity of his grace and his great kindness towards us. That there's a demonstration, I think, of just the kind of God that is by the very things that he's done in sending the Son to be incarnate amongst us and to bring about our salvation, the reconciliation.
So through that, I'm just trying to think, just the character of Jesus and the type of person that he was, and his love for people and his challenging of the Pharisees and his pointing towards the truth. That's all God's glory revealed through the Son. He reveals the truth. Well, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. That's all the glory of God being revealed through the incarnation.
Yeah.
The person that he was, how he lived, what he said.
Yeah. I think that's probably what you're saying there's right, that how would you know the kind of God he is except in his interaction with us?
Yeah.
And the very, like, obviously had interaction with other creatures besides the human race, and yet there was something special about us, made in his image, that, and then going wrong. That interaction, the love that didn't give up on us, the love that insisted upon this. It seems like the only way in which it was possible to bring this creation of his, of the human race, back into harmony with him.
Yeah.
It needed, remember Jesus said, if it's be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will.
Yeah.
And so it was essential, in order to rescue us from our rebellion and from the consequences of it, that the incarnation had to take place. Now, that what God did has shown his glory, and it's bigger than we can get our minds around yet, I think. We don't fully appreciate the gap that there was between us and God.
Yeah. I suppose I was thinking of that when Jesus becomes a human being, and you see the way that he interacts with people, you get an insight into the character of God, and that's a revelation of the glory of God.
And even beyond that, I think it shows that we have the capacity as human beings to be God-like creatures.
Yeah.
Because Jesus was who he was as a man, as a human being. He didn't bring with him the glory he put that he had as the Word, always with the Father.
He set that aside.
Yeah. And that was returned to him after his death and resurrection. But there's something to do with an extra glory because he did what he did. I was trying to get a sense out of in chapter 10, when Jesus was talking about being the good shepherd and laying down his life for the sheep. He says, I know my own sheep and my sheep know me, as the Father knows me and I know the Father. So again, it's hinting there at that relationship that's possible between human beings and God, that it's the same as the relationship already in the Godhead between the Father and the Son. But he went on and he said, and I lay down my life for the sheep. There are other sheep of mine not belonging to this fold, whom I must lead in, and they too will listen to my voice. There'll be then one flock, one shepherd. And then this mysterious saying here, the Father loves me because I lay down my life to receive it back again. No one has robbed me of it. I'm laying it down of my own free will. I have the right to lay it down, and I have the right to receive it back again. This charge I have received from my Father. I suppose that was like his choice, free choice to become incarnate, to set that glory aside and become a human being. That's one level, but I'm beginning to think that this means when he says, no one has robbed me of it, I am laying it down of my own free will, that he's now talking about as a human being. And as a human being, he had to agree with the plan of God that he should become the savior of the world by death and resurrection. And if that's true, then it means that as human beings, we also can follow his example and be the kind of person that he was.
So he's saying as a human being, he came to that conclusion that he needed to lay down his life That was his choice.
Mm.
And so what we have the same choice.
Exactly. Well, that's what I'm thinking, that it's possible as human beings for us to live in the way that Jesus lived,
Yeah.
in that harmony with God. And I'm not trying to say that I've done this at all, but I think reading through this prayer and thinking back through what Jesus has already said in the gospel, I get the impression that the end result is to be for us as human beings before Jesus comes, but here and now, the possibility of living that life as human beings, now that the Holy Spirit is given to us and that we've been reconciled and put into this relationship with God, where Jesus is in us and the Father is in us, and we're in Jesus, and we're perfectly one together with God and with each other. Have I said that right? What I'm trying to say is that this is possible, and for each one of us, it's held up as a goal, and for each one of us, it's really our spirituality comes to fruition when we expand our consciousness and kind of begin to take for granted, take for granted, that's not a good way to put it, but I think you know what I mean, that we really are somehow or other connected with the Father and the Son here and now, that there's a unity already established, and it's God regards it as already complete, and we have to regard it as the goal. It's not going to be complete for, well, I don't know when it would come to fruition, but the last thing that he says there is, "O righteous Father, although the world does not know you, I know you, and these men know that you sent me. I made your name known to them and will make it known, so that the love you had for me may be in them and I may be in them." That seems to me like Jesus, what he had begun to do in teaching the 12 and then through them teaching others. He said, I made your name known to them and will make it known. So there's an ongoing revelation from Jesus as he's opening our minds, I guess our hearts as well, to accept his plan, even though it's so mind-blowing. I can't think of other words to say, but that it's just so much of so great, so huge, so big for us to be, even feel, at times I even feel, really, am I being just ridiculous to think these kind of thoughts? But then I keep reading it there in what Jesus prayed, and back in what he'd already said beforehand, that I'm scared not to take it seriously. Like, for example, in John chapter 15, he said, dwell in my love. And just this morning, I was thinking about this, that oftentimes when I pray, I have to shape the world according to what I know, realize that there is a creator God and that he has revealed himself, and that what he's revealed is the truth, and that's what I put in place around me and gradually work into. So therefore, Father, you love me, and I need to come to that as a conclusion. But I think when Jesus said, dwell in my love, it's not a conclusion that we come to, but it's something that we take for granted. and that we should be able to just simply accept it. And almost like, is it in Ephesians when Paul talked about the height and the depth and the length and the breadth of the love of God, that it's our natural habitat. We should be free to live and to accept this as for granted and let it flow out through our lives in the way that we live. And it seems to me that all of our devotion, all of our worship, all of our commitment needs to bring us to this realization again, this consciousness that we are actually here and now part of God.
And the wonderful of that is the part of the key to the challenge that he's giving earlier, that in the same way that we're one with him and he is one with the Father, that we're then to be one with each other.
Yeah.
We can't really have that unity with one another unless we realize our unity and the love that the Father has for us. You've got to have that sorted first to be able to really love others and live in that sacrificial way towards others, which is what you were saying.
Yeah.
That we can make that choice to live sacrificially in the same way that Jesus made that choice that you talked about in John 10.
Yes. And it doesn't depend upon an organization, the World Council of Churches, and trying to all get our denominations united again. That's the wrong way to approach it. We should approach it from this experience of God, and that unity then should flow naturally, rather than something trying to be organized from outside. I think it's something, that unity is something that we recognize, not something that we join.
Is it something that works from the bottom up? You know,
Absolutely.
that we express it just with the people that we're around first of all, and then I guess we find ways to express that on a broader level.
Yeah, exactly that, I think. I mean, how do you express your unity with people that you don't meet, that you don't sort of interact with? Well, Paul organized gifts to be sent to people like from the Gentile world back to Jerusalem when there was a drought on. They were in bad shape. And so that unity that we have has to have some way of expression. And that's one way that we could express our unity with other Christians around the world. And we do. That's the giving of Christians to help in other places, the outreach.
It raises the question for me. I know that in the earlier chapters, Jesus talked about how we need to obey him and love him. And from what we thought about in John about what it means to obey Jesus, it's about believing in who he is and loving the Father. But is there much in John that we can draw on for how we should relate to each other?
Well, he did say the new commandment is to love one another.
Yeah.
And the love that he's talking about is the love that he gave us an example of by laying down his life for his friends.
Yeah, no greater love.
Yeah. And there's no limit then to what that means practically.
That's true, yeah.
I think it should show itself, first of all, when you think of material things, most of us have got enough and we're not in dire need.
Yeah.
If we were, then that would obviously be an immediate thing you should do to wasn't it in Matthew, you see somebody in prison and needs visiting. That's a good thought. It's not just a matter of giving them blankets and food and shelter, but it's that awareness of the the psychological needs that we have as human beings. And I think amongst us as Christians, we should be sensitive to one another and be prepared to offer company or whatever in that sort of sense is needed for the welfare of others. And it also, I think, actually, in practice, at least for me, I do have a sense that I should be aware of the spiritual needs of non-Christians. A woman stopped me, or didn't stop me. I was stopped, and she drove past in a car and stopped and asked me what the time was. And then, as I tried to make it a joke and said, "Do you know the day?" And as well, which was silly of me, because she then told me that she was on her way to the police, and she wanted, her neighbour was giving her a really hard time, and she was going to go and complain to the police. And she was obviously upset, and I don't know her name even, remember what she looked like. But I was thinking, she's not going to get much joy out of the police. They're not going to do anything. And she was obviously very, very upset. And I don't know what what the interaction had been with the neighbour that made her so angry, I suppose she was. More than angry. Anyway, ever since, that was a couple of days ago, and ever since, I can't get her out of my mind. I feel like I should reach out and share with her, look, the important thing isn't so much that you have comfortable life here and that you live peacefully without being disturbed by your neighbour, but there's a bigger issue, and just to share the gospel. Working out how to do that's a problem.
You just have to see her on the street again.
Well, I know where she was coming from, so I probably should go knock on doors and see if I can find her that way.
Yep.
But then you start getting pretty radical, and but then maybe that's what we should be. Jesus was pretty radical and put himself in places where he was ridiculed for the things that he did and things he said.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So how do we finish off John 17? How do we wrap that up?
Well, the last sentence there, I made your name known to them and will make it known, so that the love you had for me may be in them and I may be in them. And again, Jesus is saying that the Father loves us in the same way that he loved the Son. So that there's an out of this world kind of thing that's part of our relationship with God. It's before time began, the Father loved the Son, and it's that love that the Father has for us. And like, our response to it must surely be that we have to dwell in his love. And then the final thing, of course, is that Jesus personally may be in us.
I wonder if there's a bit there too, of there's a question I have about it, that he says, I made your name known to them. Is that just through the person that he was, by making the Father's name known to them?
He already prayed that in earlier in the prayer. He said he glorified the Father because of completing the work. And then he said, I've made your name known to the men whom you gave me out of the world. They were yours, you gave them to me, and they have obeyed my command. Now, no, they've obeyed your command. They were the Father's, the Father gave them to the Son, and they have obeyed the Father's command. Now they know that all your gifts have come to me from you. And that seems to be really critical, to know that who Jesus was is because of that relationship with the Father. And he says, now they know that all your gifts have come to me from you, for I have taught them all that I learned from you, and they have received it. They know with certainty that I came from you. They've had faith to believe that you sent me.
So that's that making known the name is teaching them all that who the Father is.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking, a name in that time, a name any time is symbolic, isn't it? It's a
Yep.
I don't know, what is it? It's important, valuable. There's a power.
Yeah. It's a shortcut to know the person who the name represents. But this is Father, and to really think that the relationship between a son and a father, or a child and a father, is the kind of relationship that there is in God, and is the kind of relationship that he wants us to have with him. The picture of an idol and kneeling down and offering up sacrifices and all that sort of thing, that comes out of an awareness of the otherness of God. But this is actually saying, no, that's true in a way, but it's more true that God wants us to think of him as a father, as a relationship that is inherent, that we can't get away from.
And that's a revelation of his name.
Yeah.
Like knowing that he wants to know us as a father. Yeah.
But it's more than that. He said, I have taught them all that I learned from you, and they have received it. So it includes not just making the name known, but making all about the purposes of God and the character that has been revealed, and the way of salvation, for example. All of this has actually been taught by Jesus. And then he said he wants those who are going to, by the words of the 12, that is, the apostles, are going to then learn what he has taught them, which is in the Bible, the writings of the New Testament.
There's made me think a bit about when Moses sees the burning bush.
Yeah.
God says to go and speak to Pharaoh, and he says, well, who shall I say is sending me? And God reveals his name. You know, he says, Yahweh, I am that I am. Yeah, I suppose this is the completion of that initial revelation, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. And this is life, that they might know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you sent.
So it's not just knowing the name, it's actually knowing the person, knowing not just through, I don't know, ideas or theology or somehow, but through experience and through intimacy and connection.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody just last weekend, and he was giving up on Christianity, but it was because the theology was too much to understand, and it was. I tried to get across to him again that look, the theology comes out of the words that are written by the people who were there, talking about an event that had happened and transformed them. And at the center of the event is this person, Jesus. And if you get to know Jesus, you can't help but know the Father who sent him. And in actually knowing Jesus in a relationship where you accept him as who he is, you're actually accepting the Father and being accepted into that fellowship, that that relationship that the Father and the Son have, that takes us out of time altogether before the world began into a kind of, into an existence that is beyond our understanding. When he said, Father, I want these to, at the end there, Father, I desire that these men who are your gift to me may be with me where I am, so that they may look upon my glory, which you gave me because you loved me before this world began. Thinking about that, it seemed a static kind of thing, sitting there looking at Jesus in his glory as the Word before he became a human being, and then as a human being elevated to that same glory. It's got to be more to it than that, obviously. It seems to me, than just sitting and looking at the glory that's there. And it is more than that, because we're actually part of it. We're in that relationship, and we've actually been given the glory that Jesus was given by the Father, so that we're put on a level that, like I'm trying to say, like over and over again, that just staggers me. But yet we have to somehow expand our consciousness to be able to take that as a reality, and even to take it for granted by faith.
Yeah.
Not by sight, but by faith.
And I would say as well, we've got to do that within the context of living as human beings in a world with a whole lot of other human beings. Like we've got to eat and interact with others, and we have homes and things to do, and a world with a whole lot of issues and problems all around us. But we step into all of that within that connection with the Father and with one another. And that's sort of the dynamic of it. I think that's where it makes it really interesting and challenging, because it's a bit messy, but at the heart of it, there's this just complete unity that we're being invited into with the Father and the Son, and then with one another within the struggle of life.
Yeah. And it's exciting to see life that way, and to force yourself to accept the disappointments and the frustrations and misunderstandings and failures, because that's how Jesus lived.
Yeah.
And it's as a human being that he succeeded in doing the will of the Father. He did it perfectly. We're learning to do it perfectly.
Yeah.
And everything that happens is part of that process, with that goal finally of being there with the glory that the Father and the Son have given to us.
Yep. I think that's probably a perfect place to end as well.
It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks, Laurie.
Oh, see you up at the church.